Welcome back, friends. You are listening to the Juicebox Podcast.
Hi, my name is Laura Keller. I am 52, so I'm dead solid into Gen X, and I spent 25 years working in diabetes, and I live with type 1 diabetes. I've had type 1 diabetes for 27 years.
This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is brought to you by my favorite diabetes organization, Touched by Type 1. Please take a moment to learn more about them at touchedbytype1.org on Facebook and Instagram. Touchedbytype1.org. Check out their many programs, their annual conference, awareness campaign, their D-Box program, Dancing for Diabetes. They have a dance program for local kids, a golf night, and so much more. Touchedbytype1.org. You're looking to help, or you want to see people helping people with type 1? You want touchedbytype1.org. While you're listening, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. I'm having an on-body vibe alert. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Eversense 365, the only one-year wear CGM. That's one insertion and one CGM a year. One CGM, 1 year. Not every 10 or 14 days. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. Today's episode is also sponsored by the Omnipod 5. And at my link, omnipod.com/juicebox, you can get yourself a free, what'd I just say? A free Omnipod 5 starter kit. Free? Get out of here. Go click on that link, omnipod.com/juicebox. Check it out. Terms and conditions apply. Eligibility may vary. Full terms and conditions can be found at omnipod.com/juicebox. Links in the show notes. Links at juiceboxpodcast.com.
Hi, my name is Laura Keller. I am 52, so I'm dead solid into Gen X, and I spent 25 years working in diabetes, and I live with type 1 diabetes. I've had type 1 diabetes for 27 years.
27 years. What does it mean you worked in diabetes?
I worked for the American Diabetes Association for 25 years. So I did everything you could do, basically. I did camps for kids with diabetes, family retreats, diabetes expos. I did fundraising, black tie events like our Father of the Year event. And I got into advocacy. So when I first got diagnosed with type 1, I was 25 years old. And I was a manager of an athletic club at the time up in the sort of north of Seattle area. Mm-hmm. And I got diagnosed and I called the American Diabetes Association to volunteer, and I called JDRF, which is now Beyond Type 1. They used to be called. JDRF didn't want to have anything to do with me because I was 25 and basically poor, right? So they never responded, especially in Seattle, because they have a really big following and they have a lot of money, which is great. They do great work, but they weren't interested in me. The ADA I called, and they called me back. And within about 3 weeks, I had a job. And so I started out as the youth program director. And in doing that for 5 years, I got to do other things, fundraising, all of that. And then I started working on advocacy. And I got really into advocacy, not because I thought that was going to be a career, but I spent about 20 years working for the ADA in advocacy. And I retired from the ADA about 3 years ago now as the vice president of grassroots advocacy.
Oh, wow.
So I spent my whole adult career in nonprofit work. I love nonprofit work. I do nonprofit consulting now, and I volunteer for several organizations as well in my retirement. And so I'm very passionate about the nonprofit space.
Awesome. When you say you're firmly, would you say Gen X? Is that what it is?
Gen X, yeah. Mm-hmm.
What does that mean to you?
That means to me, you don't piss me off. If you push me too far, I will find a way to come back and kick your ass. Ethically, of course, but I will do it. Like I have those sensibilities. I'm the chick that is at Orange Theory working out 5 days a week, and I will sing and dance on the treadmill because I hate cardio. So I'll keep it going. I get the sweetest things. I get these other people in class, they're like, it's Dancing Laura. Because I don't care what you think of me. But if I need to do cardio for 25 minutes on a treadmill, I have to do something to make it fun. And that's what I do.
In your mind, it's a generation of people who aren't worried what externally people think of them?
I think so, as a general rule.
Yeah.
I think as a general rule, obviously there's exceptions to everything, but I think as a generation, we're a little bit more, I hate to say the word hardy, but I do think so. Having raised a child, my bonus daughter, and dealt with her friends and things, I think, all those things you see on the gram in social media about, we really did drink from hoses and we really did run around and do all those things. And I feel so blessed and lucky in so many ways that I didn't have to deal with social media growing up, because I'm loud and I'm tall and I'm outspoken and all the things. I can't imagine having gone to parties and stuff with evidence.
Somebody pointing a camera.
These kids have no plausible deniability. They have none. It's like, they think they can get away with stuff. And you're like, nope. You put it on your socials. Like, sorry, busted. It's like, you idiots.
My wife asked me one time, she's like, if you murdered somebody, she's like, would you ever stop saying you didn't do it? I was like, it'd be the last thing I said in the electric chair. It wasn't me. You got the wrong guy. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Because there'd be no evidence, right? Because we're like, we just didn't have to deal with that stuff. So yeah. So I definitely identify with that.
I'm a couple years older than you, but I'm your age. And it's funny because, to bring it back to the podcast for a minute, people call me direct, and Laura, I don't know what they're talking about.
Huh.
Somebody will say, like, you're very direct. And I'll think, like, what does that mean? I can't wrap my head around why they would see me differently than they see themselves.
That is interesting.
Yeah, because I think I'm just so accustomed to living in the world where, where everyone says what they think and you can agree with them or not. And,
Exactly.
And if you don't agree with them, you just kind of quietly call them an asshole with your friends and never talk to them again.
Exactly.
You don't have to go make sure the world knows they're wrong. You just go, oh, that guy's an asshole. And that's the end of it. And then people think that of me, I would assume. And I go, okay. When I met my wife, I'm sorry, I promise we'll get to diabetes. When I met my wife, we've been married for a very long time now. Like, I think, I shouldn't say I think. I know for sure we'll be married this summer for 30 years.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Oh, she just didn't leave me because she wanted the kids to look the same. And then eventually she was like, yeah, there's so much stuff in this house. Like, how could I move it all out? You know what I mean?
Right.
When I met her, she had grown up, like, she's Catholic and kind of told to be quiet, like that kind of thing. Like, you're not running around telling people. And one day, we're not dating for very long, maybe a year. And she says to me, not everyone likes you. And I said, right. She goes, does that bother you? And I swear, I said, it would bother me if everyone liked me.
Yeah.
I don't know. What would I be then? Like, just this kind of milquetoast thing that is okay for everybody. And then, going down, that rabbit hole a little bit, she started pointing out different people. And I said, well, that person over there, that person doesn't like me at all. And she's like, I know. And that doesn't bother you. I said, what do you think of that person? And she said, well, he's kind of a dick. And I was like, yeah. I said, then what would it say about me if he liked me? I was like, you don't need everybody to like you, and you shouldn't even want everyone to like you. And I kind of translated that into this podcast too, because there are plenty of people, I'm sure, that have listened to this and been like, oh my God, what a horrible person. And plenty of people who, and I have a note from this morning that if I read it to you, you and I would start crying together. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just been so impactful for someone. Anyway, I appreciate that attitude of, like, this is who I am and here's how I think, and you can like it or not, and it's cool with me, but I'm not going to spend any time helping you parse your feelings about me. So cool. Yeah.
Why give people the power over you, right? If they don't like, that's their problem. And it's never, my husband always says, you have more self-confidence than anybody I've ever met, because I don't take stuff like that personal. It's like, why?
Yeah. No, I don't either.
Why would I let someone else make me feel bad? I can do that all on my own if I want to, I
was on a panel the other day talking to about 75 women about how to advocate for themselves in a health situation in the hospital.
Oh, nice.
And I said to them at some point, I said, if I could just give all of you just a little bit of my narcissism, I said, I think you'd be fine. But I don't mean narcissism like in a, like,
yeah,
what would they say it now? Like a toxic way.
Mm-hmm.
I have an insane amount of confidence in myself.
Yeah.
And in places where I don't, listen, I'm sure I overvalue myself in some places, but there's also places where I know I don't measure up and I just say, okay, I'm not very good at that, or I don't understand that part. And you're right. I've never once thought of that as a judgment about myself.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
No. And I think you're right about women in particular, especially when they're advocating for themselves. They have a tendency, we're sort of trained from the time we're little to be nice and to be polite.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of being firm and just stating what you believe, it's really easy for women to feel like they can't be assertive, and not in a douchebaggy way.
Yeah.
If you advocate for yourself, people are like, she's a bitch. Instead of, if a man said the exact same thing,
yeah, they're confident, or they're sticking up for themselves or something. And it's funny because I think that's fairly obvious, and at the same time been said so many times, people could hear it and think like, oh yeah, sure, that's a thing people say now. But there's some predictors in business, for example. You ask somebody to do something and a qualified woman will decline, thinking they're not qualified enough, and a man who's unqualified and realizes they're unqualified will leap forward and say, I'll do it.
Yeah, they'll fake it till they make it.
Yeah.
Enough women don't always do that. Here's an advocacy one that I used to do. So I used to, when I worked for the ADA, do these state advocacy presentations in the states that I covered for parents of kids with diabetes. And I would talk to them about what their 504 rights were and what their rights were in schools and how to advocate. And in the school system, and I don't care what state it was in, it could be Washington State, it could be Idaho, it could be New Mexico. It didn't matter the state. In a lot of situations, school districts would assume that the mom was crazy because the mom would be emotional. This is their child. This is their baby. They've got type 1 diabetes. They're trying to figure things out. They're newly diagnosed or they don't know. And nobody in their family's ever had type 1 diabetes, right? It's very traumatic. And sometimes women were a little more emotional sometimes, and they might start to cry. Well, as soon as a mom gets emotional and has a conflict with the school, they just write her off. And I used to tell people in my advocacy presentations, and this was not ADA sanctioned, but I would tell them this: if you have to, just bring a man, even if the man is your bartender, your dad, your hairdresser, it doesn't matter. You put a man in that room. If the school has labeled you as just an emotional mom, they'll take you more seriously. I also used to tell moms and parents in these advocacy trainings I would do, send the email, the same one that you sent, but from your husband's email address,
mm-hmm.
and let me know if you get a better response. Every single time they would. Every single time. If they sent it from their husband's work address or their husband's email address, and they put their husband's name on it, even if they wrote it, even if it was the exact same thing, they would get a better response from the school principal or the 504 coordinator than if it was from them.
And would it matter if the principal, the coordinator, whatever, was male or female? Today's episode is brought to you by Omnipod. Did you know that the majority of Omnipod 5 users pay less than $30 per month at the pharmacy? That's less than $1 a day for tube-free automated insulin delivery. And a third of Omnipod 5 users pay $0 per month. You heard that right, $0. That's less than your daily coffee for all of the benefits of tubeless, waterproof, automated insulin delivery. My daughter has been wearing an Omnipod every day since she was 4 years old, and she's about to be 21. My family relies on Omnipod, and I think you'll love it. And you can try it for free right now by requesting your free starter kit today at my link, omnipod.com/juicebox. Omnipod has been an advertiser for a decade, but even if they weren't, I would tell you proudly, my daughter wears an Omnipod. Omnipod.com/juicebox. Terms and conditions apply. Eligibility may vary. Why don't you get yourself that free starter kit? Full terms and conditions can be found at omnipod.com/juicebox. Today's episode is sponsored by a long-term CGM that's going to help you to stay on top of your glucose readings, the Eversense 365. I'm talking, of course, about the world's first and only CGM that lasts for 1 year. 1 year, one CGM. Are you tired of those other CGMs? The ones that give you all those problems that you didn't expect? Knocking them off, false alerts, not lasting as long as they're supposed to? If you're tired of those constant frustrations, use my link, eversensecgm.com/juicebox to learn more about the Eversense 365.
Some of you may be able to experience the Eversense 365 for as low as $199 for a full year. At my link, you'll find those details and can learn about eligibility. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. Check it out.
It really wouldn't,
Yeah.
honestly. It really wouldn't. I would love to say that it did, but it was just kind of a universal truth. So I would literally make that joke at the end of presentations. Like, hey, if you have to, bring your bartender, bring your hairdresser, bring your uncle. And they don't even have to talk in the meeting.
Yeah.
Just have a dude in the chair in the meeting with you if you're not getting good results.
Laura, I'm 5'9". I'm not particularly tall. I'm taller than a lot of people I meet during the day, but as soon as you see somebody taller than me, I look fairly short, right? And until, I don't know, 3 years ago when I found a GLP medication, I was overweight.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a deep voice, so I would try very hard to do business over the phone, because over the phone, people took me more seriously.
Isn't that interesting?
I bought a car over the phone once.
That's kind of cool, though.
Because I knew I could negotiate the price better if they couldn't see me.
See, that's brilliant.
When my son was trying to find a place to play baseball in college, after the first time of doing something in person, I realized that they couldn't meet me until they liked him, because they'd look at me and then judge him. It was really like,
interesting.
Yeah, I take your point about what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
People have baked in preconceptions. I don't think they're conscious even.
No, probably not.
And by the way, I've also given that same advice to people for probably over a decade now. I tell them all the time, like, when you find yourself explaining type 1 diabetes to a stranger, an outsider to diabetes, right?
Mm-hmm.
You sound insane, even when you're not. Right? Because there's so much to know and worry about and think about and pre-plan for.
Yeah.
You sound like a bipolar prepper when you're talking about diabetes. Like, there's no way, two ways around it, right?
Yeah.
And then if you are actually emotional on top of all that, then you really do. You sound nuts.
Yeah.
You can't let them go out on the playground by themselves without checking their blood sugar first, thinking about what I said to people prior to CGMs, like, she's going to die out there. And they'd be like,
right.
What? There's been kids with type 1 diabetes here before. And I'd say, well, those kids, A1Cs were higher and they were keeping their blood sugars high, but we're not going to do that. And then they go, well, why don't you just leave their blood sugars higher? And then I'm like, why did we? And then, now you're on down that road. And if you're not calm and measured, boy, it'd be super simple for someone to write you off quickly. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So you get we're going to kind of go backwards to go forwards, but you're 25 and you're diagnosed. Is there type 1 in your family at the time or other autoimmune?
Yeah. So my father had type 1 diabetes.
Oh.
And so I grew up watching him use the sticks to figure out what his blood sugar was and all of that. And it was actually kind of cool having my dad have type 1 diabetes, because when he thought he needed it, we'd go to Dairy Queen and it was like, yes, ice cream. So like type 1 diabetes was not necessarily this like horrible thing in my family.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was a registered nurse. And what was interesting was that when my parents went to go have kids, the doctors told them not to have kids because they would probably have a kid with type 1 diabetes. And my mom said, screw you, basically. And they had two, my sister and I. I'm the oldest. And when I got diagnosed at 25, I found out that my father got diagnosed at basically the same age, 24.
Okay.
And then his half brother also got diagnosed about the same age. So for whatever reason in my family, that's kind of the trigger point. Now, I personally think, knowing what I know now, I probably should have been diagnosed when I went off to college, because I remember doing my college health paperwork or whatever. Like, I'm 18, I'm heading off to school. You do your last physical and all that stuff. And my fasting blood glucose at that point was 123, which now that would have flagged something. But I very clearly remember the pediatrician that I saw, and my mother was in the appointment with me at the time. He said, you can't get diabetes now, because they just didn't know, right? Because that was like 1991 when I was going off to college.
That doctor was saying that at your age, you couldn't get type 1 diabetes? Oh.
Yep. And they just didn't know, right? And so you're like, okay, fine. But yeah, so my father had type 1 diabetes. We dealt with when he was low, bring him a Coke, whatever. But once I got diagnosed and I realized how different his diabetes management was compared to what mine was going to be starting in 1999, like that was just shocking to realize that he was working on old data. It's amazing that people now, we have so much better technology, even from when I was diagnosed 25 years ago.
Yeah.
I was on NPH and regular, and talk about having to have snacks and all kinds of BS to carry with you and all these things, right? It's just a completely different world. We're very lucky with the technology that we have now, but I feel like very blessed to have had a parent who had it. Like if one of us would get a paper cut, we would joke, quick, check your blood sugar, right? Don't waste it. Don't waste, like you got to have a sense of humor about it.
I'm thinking these CGMs are going to put Dairy Queen out of business.
I don't know, because you know what? But one of the things is, I do like my treats, and that's why I go to Orange Theory and work out. So I can do that and drink wine. But I think you just got to carb for it. That's the key.
Oh, no, I'm saying your dad got low and went to Dairy Queen. Now all these people have CGMs are probably not getting low anymore.
Truth. That's true. You're not.
What's going to happen to Dairy Queen?
Yeah, it's more of a choice now, right? It's a choice to go to Dairy Queen. You got to factor it in.
Okay, so you're diagnosed. You notice the difference between you and your dad.
Mm-hmm.
Does this help your father modernize his care?
Okay, so that is exactly what happened. So he was not on even Lantus at the time or a fast-acting insulin. Like he didn't have the ability to adjust for what he was eating. There was no carb to insulin ratio, none of that.
Wait, I'm sorry. In 99, your dad's doing NPH and regular still?
NPH and regular,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm sorry.
So he wasn't even on Lantus or anything. And I remember being like, what the heck? Because I at least had a sliding scale and was on Lantus after about 6 months, I got on Lantus, and maybe it was a little bit longer, but I was a patient at the University of Washington in Seattle. And I was a patient there, and their diabetes endocrinology center is fantastic. I had gotten to know Dr. Earl Hirsch because of working at the ADA and then being a patient there. And my father had definitely not been treated well in his endocrinology that he was seeing in Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't like trying to get him to modern care and up to standards. And my father got diagnosed with a rare kind of tumor on his adrenal glands. It is autoimmune kind of genetic tumor, but my sister and I got tested. We don't have that, which was nice. One autoimmune is great.
I might have the word wrong. Is it pheochromocytoma? Or is that it?
Honestly,
am I using the wrong words?
I don't remember what it was called.
Okay.
But I remember they tested us because they said it was genetic. But while he was there and going in, I kept talking to my dad. It's like, you need to have a sliding scale. You need to have options, because he would just take the same thing every day. And I called it the rule of sevens. No matter what, he always just like took 7 units, right? And his doctor wouldn't do anything. And I got frustrated because I tried to advocate for my dad with his endocrinologist that was in Oregon. And so I was telling Earl this one day, and I said, hey, I'm going to give my dad your book, because he had a book about, and it had all this like data and why. And my dad was an analytical business guy, and he was data minded, and he was really smart. But his doctor just wouldn't give him the information he needed the way that it would work for my dad. So I gave him Earl's book, and then he was like, oh, that makes sense. So then he went to his doctor and asked for it, and his doctor still said no. So God bless Earl Hirsch. I told him that. He called my dad's endocrinologist and said, look, this guy can handle it, do it. I don't know. I'm not privy to that conversation. This was a while ago. My dad passed away about 12 years ago.
Okay.
But he did that. And when my dad had his surgery for his adrenal glands, his endocrinologist came out into the waiting room where my sister and my mom and I were waiting at Kaiser Hospital in Oregon. And he wasn't very happy, because he goes, yeah, Earl Hirsch called me about your dad. We'll get him on that. And then what was so funny is after his surgery, they got him on Lantus and more of a sliding scale with Humalog. And my dad's A1C was never above 7.5 the rest of his life.
Awesome. Oh, that's amazing.
I know. It was pretty cool. And because he got on good care, my dad had his only real complications from type 1 diabetes were he did have a little bit of retinopathy.
Mhm.
And once they stabilized his blood glucose, because they got him on a more modern treatment, his insulin management stuff and carb counting and all that, his retinopathy kind of froze, right? And it didn't progress further. So that was kind of cool.
That's awesome. By the way, I blurted out the name of a tumor, but that's an adrenal gland tumor, just in case I don't want people.
Or my dad was an adrenal gland tumor.
Oh,
that's
it was.
what it was. So it might have been that. It was on his adrenal glands. Yeah.
Oh.
So that might be it.
Pheochromocytoma. Maybe. Anyway. Okay. Well, that's awesome. By the way, very common to type 1s, I would say, especially men whose children are later diagnosed, they often upgrade their care. That's awesome. Fairly common story that I've heard. Do you have any other autoimmune?
I don't. Luckily, knock on wood, I do not.
How about your sister?
She does not either. And she was tested as part of like the type 1 testing to see if she carried the gene. She seems to be okay. So that's good.
Anything else though, like thyroid, celiac, anything like that?
No. Well, so my sister does have some thyroid issues. I do not. Mm-hmm. But she doesn't have like Hashimoto's or anything.
But she's taking Synthroid?
That's good. I'm not sure, honestly, if she's taking Synthroid or not.
You're in your 50s. I don't know if you're chatting with each other about everything all the time.
Yeah. I mean, we talk almost every day, but
that's beautiful.
Yeah, we're pretty lucky that way. But I don't know. I'll have to ask her after this is over, just for curiosity's sake.
And then my last little backwards question before we move forwards is your dad's half brother on his mom's or his dad's side?
It is on mom's side. So it was my dad's mother. What's interesting, and I don't know if this is scientifically proven or not, but I do know that some of the highest concentration of people with type 1 diabetes is in like the Nordic cultures and like Sweden, Norway. And my dad's mom's family was very Swedish. When I was growing up, my mom used to yell at my dad sometimes and say he was a stubborn Swede and was always told we were Swedish. I'm actually blonde and 5'11", so I kind of have that Viking look, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah,
but
you could cross an ocean and then kill my family if you want.
But I always thought that was interesting that sort of rang true that we had type 1 diabetes a little bit.
Yeah, I see it when I interview people like Nordic backgrounds. Irish is another one where I see it, Irish English, like there. Even Nordic people kind of immigrated towards Minnesota and Wisconsin and everything. And there's clusters there of diabetes.
Yep.
I think it's fairly common.
Yeah. So I think that's it. So it's on my grandma's on my dad's side. So his mom. Yep.
Okay. Now, you get this job with the ADA.
Yep.
And is it overwhelmingly a positive experience, it sounds like?
For me, yes. I loved working at the ADA. It was really good. I mean, at the end of the day, a job's a job, and there's always going to be parts of the job that are frustrating or great. But I had a great 25 years, met some great people, passed some great legislation to protect people's rights in schools and jobs, access to health care, things like that during my advocacy time.
I was going to say, what things do you think you saw bettered for people while you were there?
So passed a lot of school legislation and did some discrimination for kids in schools to a certain extent. By passing the laws, I think, there's still a lot of work to be done. And unfortunately, in advocacy, I think one of the things that is frustrating for me as a person living with type 1 diabetes is that things are sort of going backwards in terms of protections, cost, health insurance access, the way they can defray costs, all of those things. So that is sad and frustrating.
Pick something specific you think is going backwards.
Okay, I'll give you something specific.
Yeah.
With the Department of Education federally making changes and trying to get rid of some of the protections that all kids with disabilities have in schools, that's going to be hard, right? Because I remember when I was a state advocacy director and I would get calls and people wouldn't allow their kids with diabetes to play basketball because they'd have to go on a bus and they said no one else could help them or assist them. And that's kind of scary, I think, for kids with disabilities of all kinds, some of the rollbacks and the protections they're putting in place. And they get calls and say things like, your kid is too smart. They don't need a 504 plan or they don't need protections. Well, the reason why they need those protections is so that they can continue to excel at school, right? Like you need protections in place. And so some of those kinds of things I think are getting rolled back from the federal level. And that sucks. From a health insurance perspective, I have been trained on diabetes advocacy. I know what to do. I used to train people on how to pick a health insurance plan in the exchange, what to look for, all of the things. And I got screwed this year and I'm pissed about it, quite frankly, because I did everything right.
Yeah, this is actually why you're on. So I feel like, I don't know if you realize, like I got your whole backstory and we had some fun and now I'm just lighting a fuse and I'm going to let you explode.
Fair enough.
Yeah, this is why you wanted to come on the podcast. So lay it out for people.
Yeah, so I know what I'm doing. I was a diabetes advocate for 20 years and I trained people. I fought health insurance at the state level. I went to Congress, taught advocates how to advocate for themselves. I did all the things. I'm a trained professional and I was looking at the exchange. I had to buy an exchange this year. Mm-hmm. I did everything right. And so I wanted to come on to share my story so that one, people know they're not alone. Two, kind of share so we can commiserate together, but also so that people know what to keep doing. So I went to the exchange this year and I looked and I had a great plan last year. My plan last year was a Aetna banner plan in the state of Arizona. And it was awesome. It covered my insulin pods. I'm on the Omnipod at $40 a copay. It covered my insulin, all the things. Great plan. Loved it. All the things. So they pulled out of the Arizona exchange because obviously things are changing. Subsidies are changing. And so they decided not to have any plans. So I get a letter that says the comparable plan now in Arizona is this Ambetter Arizona Complete Plan. And I never take that stuff for face value. I know as a consumer, you have to do your due diligence. So I did. I looked at the other plans. I looked at who covers my endocrinologist, all of the things, right? The hospitals I want to go to, the specialists. And then I went on Ambetter's website and I pulled their PDL, which is their list of all the medications and what tiers they cover them under and what are the rules. And I searched for insulin. I searched for insulin pumps. I searched for continuous glucose monitors. I searched for CGMs. I searched for type 1 diabetes. Nothing came up. Nothing came up. And I was like, okay, so because they don't have any of those categories, and I read through that, several page document, that must mean they cover those things, right? So then I call Ambetter and I talk to one of their, like, if you're not buying through the exchange, you're just asking them questions, the people who sell you their plans. Do you cover type 1 diabetes, insulin pods, and CGMs? And they all said yes. I was like, great. Then I went on the World Wide Web and I used AI, Chat GPT, and Copilot, and I searched and I said, does Ambetter cover insulin pods and pumps and CGMs for people with type 1 diabetes? Everything said yes. Okay. Then I also saw that they have these diabetes plans and they cover these things, right? And they covered my endocrinologist office, which is like a standalone endocrinology office in the Scottsdale area.
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, all the signs are there, right?
This is all good news.
All good news.
Yep.
And I tell my husband, I was like, okay, I can't guarantee this is the plan, but based on everything, this is what I know. And what I also know is that when you have a chronic disease like type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, any other kind of chronic disease, if you can, you should buy like a silver or a gold plan or higher because the cost sharing and things like that are going to be better. And your prescription drug coverage are going to be better. You're usually better off to pay a little bit more monthly than to have these like high deductible, low monthly costs because it works better if you
need your insurance. You're going to be using your insurance, right?
Yeah. And so I picked a silver plan. And nowhere on there does it say, like, I don't even need referrals for my Ambetter Arizona Complete Silver Plan. I don't even need referrals, okay? I picked a solid plan, but it had a $5,000 deductible. And then anything after that was 40% coinsurance. But nowhere on their website does it say they don't cover insulin pumps. So my endocrinologist fills out at the beginning of January the prior authorization for my CGM and my insulin pods, and they get denied. And the reason they got denied was because they said it wasn't medically necessary. Okay. That was the reason I was told by Ambetter that an insulin pump was not medically necessary. The only reason why I knew that is because I called them and asked. You can't just sit around and wait. You have to call. Yeah. Okay. You have to call and you have to ask. So I called and asked, like, what's going on? Because on their website, they have this section where they tell you if your claims have been denied or if they're pending or whatever in my account, but it doesn't tell you anything. It's just numbers. So you have no idea what that pending denial, whatever means, only the numbers. And there's no grid or anything, and you can't click on it to get more detail. It's just numbers up there. So anyway, I was like, why aren't my pods coming through? Right. And it said they were denied when I called, and I was like, why? And they said it wasn't medically necessary. And I was like, what do you mean not medically necessary? I have type 1 diabetes. I'm going to have type 1 diabetes for my whole life, right? This isn't something I can control in terms of if I have it or not. And so I kind of lit up the customer service people. Now, I was very direct. I was very frustrated, but I always thanked them for their time and told them, I know this is not your fault. This is a systemic company problem and not a them problem, but I was very direct. And they said, well, it was because they only gave 3 months of blood glucose information. Well, first of all, I have type 1 diabetes. Why would you need more than 3 months if my endocrinologist says I need this? Like, that's ridiculous, but okay, we're going to play the paperwork game. I go back to my endocrinology office. I ask them to resubmit. They do. Okay. I give it 3-4 days. I call them back, the Ambetter.
Yeah.
And they go, well, your account was closed. I go, excuse me? Your appeal was closed. And at this point, I am just livid, okay? Livid. And they go, your account's closed. And I go, what do you mean you closed it? And they go, well, because they sent in the 6 months of data on the wrong form. And I was like, what? And there's nothing in my account online that says this. They didn't mail me a letter. And I asked them, I was like, did you tell my endocrinology office that you closed my appeal because they sent it on the wrong form? Well, no. And I was like, do you even understand type 1 diabetes? Honestly, even though I'm a trained professional and I would consider myself pretty tough, like, I'm not a quitter by any means, and clearly I'm not, because I'm still talking about this.
But it's a lot though, right? Like,
it is a lot. And I started crying. I started crying because I was so mad at myself, right? I was so frustrated, and they so didn't understand what type 1 diabetes was. These people, even in their pharmacy that I'm talking to about this appeal,
right?
And they're not taking it seriously, that I started crying. And I get off the phone and my husband's like, don't cry. You never cry. I don't like to see you cry. And I was like, I know, but I just feel like an idiot.
Did you say, I should have brought my bartender with me? This would have went better.
Right, exactly. Seriously, right? So then I go back to my endocrinology office and I say, hey, I'm sorry to bother you, but I need you guys to resubmit. They need 6 months of data. So they go back, then they resubmit it again. Nothing happens. So then I call up a few days later. They said they never got anything. I was like, what do you mean? I mean, I'm going through all the paces. I've talked to so many people. It's ridiculous.
Right.
So now we're at like the first week of February. So it's been a month and I don't have any insulin pods unless I pay out of pocket, which I did. I did call Omnipod. Shout out to Omnipod. Best customer service in the world. They've called to check in on me to see how I'm doing.
Nice.
They have tried to help me and give me advice. They actually sent me a couple free pods here and there to get me so that I didn't have to spend quite as much money out of pocket. And they do have like a copay card. They have a copay card if you have insurance for secondary insurance. Mm-hmm. They've been great. So just know that if anybody's got the pod, fantastic customer service.
Omnipod.com/juicebox if you'd like to get started
That's
today.
it. Okay. Well, there you go. Highly recommend. So I'm dealing with all of this, trying to keep this going. I get them on the first week of February to send the right form because they sent it on the wrong form, I guess. The 6 months that they needed or whatever on the wrong form. They fax it to my endocrinologist's office. they said to me. So then I check in the following week, so we're now at the second week of February, and they said they didn't get it. I reach out to my endocrinology office and they say, no, we sent it. We sent the information. So I call back the next day. They said they didn't get it. I was like, how is this possible? How is this possible? They're like, I don't know. We didn't get it. We didn't get it. So then last week, I reached back out to my endocrinology office to say, hey, they didn't get your forms. They said they're going to fax you a new form.
Mm-hmm.
Friday, my endocrinologist is the 13th of February, says, yeah, we'll resend it. So then last week, same thing. They still don't have it. They didn't get it. They resent the form. I'm talking to my endocrinology office. So we're talking multiple time I'm wasting with their customer service, with their pharmacy people, my own time, my endocrinology's office time. Finally, Monday of this week, they say they got the actual form, a new form or whatever, and they sent it in. And I said, hey, just to confirm, is this the first time you've sent this information in? And they said, no, they have done this several times, and that my second appeal was denied. I was like, and they didn't even tell me that at Ambetter.
Yeah.
Like, it is horrible. And I was so frustrated when I was talking to the Ambetter people the last time. I was like, okay, if you don't like people with type 1 diabetes, just put it on your damn website. Just be honest. Just put it on there.
I talk to you, and I'll have to tell you when I'm done, I am not better when I speak to you.
Exactly. Exactly. It's truth. It's truth.
The rigmarole is set up to try to get you to give up. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And if you don't dog them and call them, that's how people give up. That's how people spend all this money out of pocket. And here is the most insane part of this, besides the fact that they're supposed to cover this, and probably eventually they will, I hope, but they don't cover your insulin pumps or your CGM until you've met your deductible and you pay your max out of pocket. So even if they were approved this today, okay, or tomorrow or next week or whatever, even though it's been 2 months in, so they've gotten away with 2 months of not having to pay for my insulin pumps at all, they're going to have to charge me now 40% coinsurance, because I was able to switch my plan to a no deductible plan because my income has changed, because I'm no longer working right now. So my income changed. So I could go into the exchange and change my plan. That was really nice. I'm very lucky I could do that. Otherwise, I would have had to have reached $5,000 out of pocket and then pay 40% coinsurance. So in this plan, I pay no out of pocket and I still have to pay 40% coinsurance. So even when they approve it, I'm still paying 40%, which is several $100s for a month's worth of insulin pods, right? And then once I get my max out of pocket, then they'll start covering it instead of just offering it as a copay. That is ridiculous. And I was so frustrated. I was like, you also could put a statement on your plan about how you cover type 1 diabetes, how you cover insulin, how you cover insulin pods. And shout out to CVS, because those pharmacists, like, they have been trying to help me so much, find me copay cards, find me things with CGMs. Yeah. They also won't pay for my Dexcom because you have to use the Libre. I'm not saying the Libre is not a great product, but it's not the same. The Dexcom, I'm on the G7 15. I can bolus from my phone. It's one less thing that I have to carry around. And I'm already carrying around goo for low blood sugars and granola bars and extra diabetes supplies as backup.
Wait, I'm sorry. Are you saying because you're on Omnipod 5?
Yeah.
Well, how would they possibly tell you that Omnipod 5 is okay, but the CGM that makes it work is not okay? This episode was too good to cut anything out of, but too long to make just one episode. So this is part 1. Make sure you go find part 2 right now. It's going to be the next episode in your feed. The conversation you just heard was sponsored by Touched by Type 1. Check them out, please, at touchedbytype1.org on Instagram and Facebook. You're going to love them. I love them. They're helping so many people at touchedbytype1.org. Are you tired of getting a rash from your CGM adhesive? Give the Eversense 365 a try. Eversensecgm.com/juicebox. Beautiful silicone that they use. It changes every day. It keeps it fresh. Not only that,
You only have to change the sensor once a year. So, I mean, that's better. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Omnipod 5. And at my link, omnipod.com/juicebox, you can get yourself a free, what'd I just say? A free Omnipod 5 starter kit. Free? Get out of here. Go click on that link, omnipod.com/juicebox. Check it out. Terms and conditions apply. Eligibility may vary. Full terms and conditions can be found at omnipod.com/juicebox. Links in the show notes, links at juiceboxpodcast.com. Hey, thanks for listening all the way to the end. I really appreciate your loyalty and listenership. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. All right, let's get down to it. You want the management stuff from the podcast. You don't care about all this chitting and chatting with other people. Juiceboxpodcast.com/lists. They are downloadable, easy to read. Every series, every episode, they're all numbered. Makes it super simple for you to go right into that search feature in your audio app, type Juicebox 1795 to find episode 1795. Juiceboxpodcast.com/lists. If you're looking for community around type 1 diabetes, check out the Juicebox Podcast private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast, type 1 diabetes. But everybody is welcome. Type 1, type 2, gestational, loved ones, it doesn't matter to me. If you're impacted by diabetes and you're looking for support, comfort, or community, check out Juicebox Podcast, type 1 diabetes on Facebook. Have a podcast? Want it to sound fantastic? WrongWayRecording.com.